It's getting ridiculous how many takes it's taken me to try to record this video, but here we go again. Hello my fellow Indonesians, welcome back to my channel. Let's have a chat about mental health. On this channel, I've made a lot of videos about chronic illness because I suffer from a slew of them, from eosinophilic esophagitis, which is a swallowing disorder, to gastroparesis, which is delayed gastric emptying and affects how food moves through my body. But recently, about 5 months ago, I was discharged from a residential program for an eating disorder. I've briefly mentioned that I have ARFID on this channel, which is Avoidant Restrictive Food Intake Disorder. I don't know how many of you will recall that about 3.5 years ago, I was discharged from a partial hospitalization program for anxiety. And I was there I did a 3-week program, it was about 15 days, and I went Monday through Friday, and it was 6 hours a day, and I was missing part of school to go there. And I was absolutely devastated. I have always tried to be a high achiever, high performer. I always want to be the best at what I do. There's a competitive nature within me to try to be the best. And I have to accept that my brain is not the best. I should have come to this conclusion ages ago, and maybe this should be a written essay and not a video essay, but my brain is not the best. And my body is not the best, and that is something that I have to come to terms with. I have chronic illness. Chronic means it is ongoing. It's not an acute problem like a broken bone that will mend in 6 to 8 weeks. This will continue, but that doesn't mean that I have to suffer the whole time. I went through the partial hospitalization program, and I was devastated that I was missing 3 weeks of school. This past spring, I went to a residential program, which means that I lived in a facility, and I had programming most of the day. I ate all my meals and snacks there, I slept there, I had a roommate, and I was terrified. But it's something that I knew I had to do, and it's something I accepted and that I wanted to do because I wanted to get better. I finally gained this sense of acceptance. This is what I want to do. But it was a long road to get there. When I went to the PHP, the partial hospitalization program for anxiety, I was also suffering from an eating disorder. I remember the food behaviors that I would do and some OCD behaviors that I would do preparing for the one meal that I had at that program. And I also remember people didn't always sit next to me at lunch. Sometimes I was just alienated by myself, and I would eat as fast as I could so that I could get out and pace the hallways because I was just so full of anxiety about the meal and about being in groups. And yet 5 months ago I was in a program with 14 girls, and I had 3 meals and 3 snacks a day and 3 group therapy sessions a day, and I survived. I did it. But recovery isn't linear. I'm not cured of my eating disorder. I'm not cured of my anxiety. It's a chronic illness of sorts. It's a chronic mental illness. I believe that I can recover from my eating disorder. There will be a day where it is not all-consuming in my mind. Today's not that day, because I admit I haven't been doing the best in terms of treatment and recovery recently, but I'm still trying. I'm putting in effort, and that's something that I didn't do before. I remember this was last summer, or last fall, in 2020. I hadn't gone to therapy for a few weeks, and I was scared to reach out to my therapist to request another session, because I didn't want her to think that I had failed at therapy and needed to go back. And saying that aloud, it sounds sort of ridiculous. How can you fail at therapy? Therapy is something that everybody should go to. It doesn't just have to be, oh, I messed up, now I need therapy. You can go to therapy when you're doing good too. But I was scared to go to her because I had been seeing her since I went to that partial hospitalization program. And I needed to admit to her that I had an eating disorder because I hadn't done that yet. And I needed to admit to her that I needed help. She was an eating disorder specialist who I had essentially lied to and tried to cover up the fact that I had an eating disorder, and I don't know if I did a good job or a poor job, but that's how our relationship had been for several years. And this year, or last year, I finally decided I need to do something about this. I started grad school in the fall of 2020, and we were in a poetry unit, and I couldn't decide what to write about. And so I texted my friend Jonathan, and I said, what do I do? And he told me to write about what you can't stop thinking about. As a person with anxiety, my brain is constantly thinking all the time about so many things. But I wrote about food, and my disordered relationship with food. And that was a trend throughout the fall semester. And as it continued, I realized I need to contact my therapist and bring this up with her because I can't do this by myself. And so I sent her a document. It was maybe 40 pages long. And I sent an email. I wonder if I can find it. Pause for a moment. I sent my therapist an email on October 8th, 2020. And the subject line was, "Subject lines are hard, life is hard, a life update." Hello. In asterisks. Isn't sure how to begin this email, so I'm going to use bullet points so I don't ramble too much. And asterisks. 1. I'd like to schedule another appointment, but I was too scared to text you. By the way, my school is online, so I'm still at home. 2. You know how sometimes you give me therapy assignments? I gave myself an assignment last night, and I've been working on it for many hours. 3. I'd like you to read what I wrote/compiled. It's attached to this email. 4. The document's 38 pages long. 5. This email is a long time coming, and having you read my writing is making me extremely anxious, but I know things will only get better if I send it to you. 6. I needed a 6th bullet point, so I'd have an even number, but ran out of notes. In the spirit of honesty, I will now continue to be anxiety-ridden until you respond to this. If you choose to read and respond, that is. My head is kind of a mess. Thanks for your time. The document was called An Inside Look. In the document, I had journal excerpts and poems about my disordered eating and my disordered brain. She replied a few hours later, my therapist, saying it was really nice to hear from me. She's not mad at me, and she's going to read the document. She'd get back to me as soon as she could. We scheduled an appointment together and went from there. I had to tell my parents I had an eating disorder, and that was one of the hardest things I had ever done. Preparing for that therapy session, I was in tears. I took Ativan before the appointment, and in the end I ended up writing letters to them because I feel I am not always the best at communication. I do have social communication disorder as well. Let's tack that onto the list. And I thought, okay, I'll give them these letters and we'll go from there. So I wrote them each a letter, and they read it in our session, and I had to say aloud, I have an eating disorder. And I had talked about it with my therapist before that, but admitting it to people who knew me was so scary. I had to tell my friends, I told my classmates, I told my parents, and then I started looking for therapy options that would be a proper level of care for me, and that ended up being residential treatment. I had to miss more school. As a person who always wants to be the best and do her best, missing school did not seem like an option that was feasible. I was terrified of missing school because missing school would put me behind and I'd be missing out on my friends and my schoolwork, and I didn't want my professors to get mad, but it's something I needed to do. COVID has been hard on the entire world, but it allowed school to be online for a year, and I needed that. Because when I went to residential treatment, some of my professors allowed me to continue classwork at my own pace while I was at res, and I would email it to them each week. Halfway through the semester, when it was spring break, I discharged from res so I could go back to school. Was I ready to discharge? I'm not entirely sure. I was doing a program, and it was essentially for anorexia. I've come to the conclusion with my psych team that I probably have more ARFID than anorexia traits. So it wasn't quite the proper treatment that I needed, but it was still necessary. I thought I was a failure because I couldn't be in school. I thought I was a failure at therapy. But I'm not. I'm a human who's trying. I don't know where I want this video to go, but I want people to know that it's okay to not be okay. When I made my partial hospitalization debrief videos, I was sitting on the ground, so that's why I'm on the ground in this video. I would frequently have floor conversations with friends or just collapse on the floor at the end of hard days when I was in school. And I'm still in school. I'm still in grad school. The world did not stop spinning because I had to go to residential. And I'm trying to keep that in mind because after residential, usually you step down to partial hospitalization program or intensive outpatient. But I went straight to outpatient because I was in school, because I was still prioritizing school. And I still am. And I don't know if that's a mistake, because recently my new therapist has decided that I should do higher level of care again. And I have a dietitian now who I'm working with, but it's very expensive. And I know I shouldn't let money or school get in the way of my health, right? But it's hard. And so I'm trying some new treatment options. I don't know if I'm going to end up back in residential or back in a partial hospitalization program. I don't know where treatment is going to take me next. I was in New York for my residential treatment. I was in Pennsylvania for my partial hospitalization program. But for ARFID, you have to have someone who knows ARFID. So right now I'm seeing a specialist that's around me. And I hope that it goes well. I just had a first appointment with her last week. Recovery isn't linear. It's going to have ups and downs. When I got out of treatment, there were days that were great. And I realized my disordered eating habits and trends, and I was trying to fix them, actively fixing them and actively working on them. And then some days I'd slip up, and I'd realize I slipped up and I wanted to do better. And there's still that drive in me to want to do better. But some days that drive isn't there, and that's how I know that I needed help again. And so I'm trying my best. Is it my best? Do I know what my best is anymore? I recognize that partial hospitalization or intensive outpatient might be better for me, and it might be wise to take a year off school. But I'm not. I'm trying again to be in school and manage life and my disorders at the same time. I know it will be okay if I can't do the spring semester and have to do more treatment. And if I don't have to do more treatment, that's great too. I'll continue in outpatient. I don't know how long this road of recovery is going to be before it gets better. But for now, I'm trying my best. The best that I can in this moment with the energy that I have. And I have to accept that. I've started keeping a book of delights. I started reading the Book of Delights by Ross Gay, and when I was in residential, we would always give our delight at the end of the day, and I thought it was silly. But my delights include sunrises, fulfilling Etsy orders, drinking tea with my cousin, learning how to play Mario Kart on a video game controller instead of a Wii remote. Simple things like that. Getting to pet my cat, getting to pet my cousin's cats. And those are all valid delights. And they're gonna fill up my little notebook that I have. It's a Harry Potter notebook, which is a delight of its own. My friend comes back from vacation next week and I'll get to see her. My other friend got married a year ago and had her reception yesterday, and I got to see her and her sister and their family. All of these are little delights, and they're delights along the road of recovery. Even though there are ups and downs, there's always a delight at the end of the day. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. Comment below how you're doing honestly, and as always, thanks for watching.